Cool. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's installment of the Washington Post's weekly video game news show, Story Mode, or WaPo Story Mode for short. Still feels weird to say it, but it's what it's called. And it was in part my idea, so I don't know why I'm regretting it publicly. In any case, I am one of your hosts, Washington Post reporter Nathan Grayson, and I am joined by Washington Post reporter Shannon Liao, and also two special guests this week to discuss the upcoming League of Legends Worlds Finals. Those guests are Jacob Wolf.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here and talking to you guys.
Can you give us a little tiny intro about who you are and kind of what you do in the scene?
Sure. I am the chief reporter and investigative lead at Dot Esports. What that fancy title means is I lead the investigations department at Dot Esports, which is the second most read esports publication on the internet with more than 14 million monthly active users. I am also the founder of a company called Overcome, which is a production company that does documentaries, investigative podcasts, and the like, which my first one will be next year. Previous to these two jobs, I was the reporter on a staff of writers and editors at ESPN and covering esports for 4.5 years there. And I've been breaking news about League of Legends for the past 7 years of my life, which is a really seems like a pretty long amount of time, but I guess really is not.
Man, that's existentially upsetting. In any case, we're also joined by Emily Rand. Emily, take it away.
Hello. So my name is Emily Rand. Firstly, I apologize if you hear any construction. They're doing construction outside my apartment. I am a broadcast analyst for the North American League of Legends Championship Series, which is their professional league. I also appeared on the World Championship broadcast more recently. Previously, I was an esports features writer and journalist, and I actually worked with Jacob at ESPN, so this is kind of a little mini reunion for us. And I'm so sorry about the noise. I cannot do anything about it.
No, like I said earlier, it's just like having an extra guest, just, disembodied construction noises.
Yeah, the circular saw is our additional guest.
Yeah, I'm sure it has a lot of good perspectives to offer.
It's the live audience clapping.
Canned laughter from circular saw. So, right. I think we should probably start by kind of setting the stage for kind of what the LCS finals look like this year. And so I guess as a question to everybody, because by the way, all of you know League of Legends way better than me. I've dabbled in the game itself. I haven't followed the esports scene that much. But in this particular case, so who are the teams playing in the finals? And was it a surprise that any of them got here? Or is this all kind of like the expected lineup for the finals?
For me, I don't know if I can take this because this is my forte. For me, Tamwon Gaming, which is a South Korean team, they're actually the defending world champions from last year. It was not at all surprising that they're here. I think myself included, but a lot of people looked at them to possibly repeat and have a second title in a row. I picked them as one of my favorites alongside a Chinese team called Fun Plus Phoenix that bombed out in groups and had like probably the worst performance from a major region that we've seen ever compared to expectations. So, I got one of my pre-tournament favorites, right? And then the other team that's in the finals is actually the team that beat that team I just mentioned, Fun Plus Phoenix, in the Chinese league finals. And they are Edward Gaming. They are a Chinese team that have been around since 2014. They're kind of a team that's always had very high expectations because since their existence, they have performed typically very well domestically. They had a string of consecutive domestic titles, but they've actually never made it past Worlds quarterfinals until this year. So that was actually a major achievement for them, even making semifinals, because people, including their long-suffering fans, would always joke about how they were cursed to never make it past quarterfinals. And so I think for me personally, who picked FPX incorrectly, I did not expect EDG to get here, but based on how the tournament metagame has evolved and how the game has been played, I think EDG of the Chinese teams, at least, were definitely the most well equipped to play in this meta. So in that way, it's not very surprising.
Yeah, it's actually kind of fitting. Emily talks about EDG and their lack of international success at times. My first ever esports event as a journalist was them hoisting one of their first international trophies, MSI 2015 in Tallahassee,
the
Florida.
One that everyone forgets.
Yes, and they beat T1 in the final of an international event, which was something. I think it's shocked a lot of people. I mean, I would agree with the sentiment that they're the team that always looks like even when they win domestic finals, they always look like they could do it, but something happens and they don't. And so yeah, I sort of echo what Emily's saying. I think Damwon kind of felt like a little bit of a shoe-in, like they were kind of repeating a form and from last year. But EDG is I'm a little surprised to see them here too. They would not be the LPL representative I would have picked.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, I also interviewed Fun Plus Phoenix early on, and I think it was right after they had just won a game, but barely, against NA, and they were saying how bad they had bombed the game. I think it was against Cloud9. And I wonder if you can give some context to like how young these teams are compared to like people who've like watched League for the 9 years that's gone on for. Are these the same teams that you've seen from the beginning? Like, are they how young are they?
Well, FPX are also world champions just from 2019, not 2020. And it is the exact same roster, minus their top laner, which they actually got from the world championship lineup of Tom last year. They basically signed their top laner for this season. In terms of FPX, I'm not sure about their existence as an org, how long they've been around. I think it's like 3 or 4 years now, but this team has been together for a while by League of Legends standards, because turnover on teams is really, really common. So the core 4 of the team going in had played on a world championship winning lineup. And then for Tamwon, they actually have a really cool story where they kind of came up together through the Korean Challenger circuit to make it to the World Championship in 2019. They got beaten by G2, who ended up making it to the finals, and then they won the next year. And so obviously, I just said that their top laner went to FPX after they won in 2020. So their top laner for this year actually has a really cool story. He's been around for so long, like so much longer than people think. He's been around since 2013 when he was in the OGN Champion Series called Hanlabong on the team called Prime Optimus. And he's actually going into his mandatory South Korean military service last year, next year rather. So this is his like last hurrah, and he's been performing so well. It's very cool to see him join this core for team members that came up together, and then have like Old Man Khan in the top lane. It's been a really fun dynamic to watch, and they're just if you've ever seen any of their shoulder content or their interviews, like especially Khan, but the entire team are just a bunch of really fun personalities that all seem to get along very well.
Yeah, and on the EDG side, you talk about longevity. Like Scout and Mako are 2 players who have been doing this together on the same team for a really long time. Their mid laner and their support. Scout was, before he joined EDG, he was basically backup to Faker on SK Telecom T1 in South Korea, but he's been on this EDG team since 2016, and that is a significant amount of time. The fact that there is a quote unquote franchise player that exists on any team in League of Legends, especially as one as I would say as volatile as China, where you have people who are willing to spend lots of money on some of these big name talent. It's rare, and Doinby, by contrast, the Fun Plus Phoenix mid laner is maybe an apt comparison in that regard. Another person who's been with this team for a very long time as well, an abnormally long time relative to his competitors. But Mako as well. The support has been there for a long time. These two people have been sort of chugging along with various different iterations of this roster around them. And I would say this certainly seems like, other than the 2016 EDG lineup or 2015 EDG lineup that didn't include either of them, this seems like the one that is the best by standard or metric, I would say, from an international perspective.
The
Right.
2015 roster did include Mako, just as
Yeah.
a note. Mako actually joined after replacing this. The EDG founding was kind of like a weird, awkward offshoot of World Elite that I don't have time to get into because it's very dramatic. But Mako replaced FCZF, who was previously the World Elite support that came over. And I'm glad you mentioned Mako, Jacob, because if I think of a franchise player on Edward Gaming, who is still currently playing. So obviously, firstly, I think of Clear Love, who is still technically on the roster. He's their jungler. He was a founding member, but he hasn't really played. Mako, who, his rookie season was in 2015, has been a phenomenal backbone for this team. He is one of their primary shot callers. He has led several iterations of this team and has had to deal with those kind of massive expectations that we've talked about and not meeting them at World Championships. So I'm glad you called him out because I think he is a huge part of this team's success.
And compared to like I was say compared to the 2015 team that hoisted that MSI trophy that he was on, like Emily said massive expectations. I mean, they signed a World Championship mid laner after he won his world championship to be on that team. They signed a world semi-finalist mid lane or bot laner, AD Carry, who everybody thought was the best AD Carry, even better than the one who actually won the world championship that year. People were very high. I'm referring to Deft. People were very high on his stock as a player back then, and they won that 2015 midseason trophy, and then did not repeat that expectation at 2015 Worlds later in that same year. But I mean, this is a team that has had no issue with pulling out the checkbook to recruit some of the biggest names over the years, and has just struggled to get there. But it is rare in the case of Scout and Mako to actually have players that stick around this long through that many iterations of a roster, basically in League.
Yeah, I actually interviewed Mako in Chinese, and I was struck by how eloquent he was, given his young age, and then I realized he's been doing this for like a very long time.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really impressive. And one thing he said was that he was extremely tired from having to train all day long, from the early morning to like around after midnight, every day. And then he said, but he has to do it because he's a professional player. And I wonder if you want to talk about that, but I think that might be getting in the weeds a little. If there was like one other thing I wanted to raise, which was we talked about T1 not making it past Damwon. Was that surprising to you, given that T1 is the team that has basically the most world trophies under its belt?
It was not at all surprising to me because the most impressive thing about this particular T1 lineup is how much they got their stuff together really late in the season. They actually had a lot of internal drama that then involved their coaching staff leaving and interim coaches stepping up, and it really seemed like this team was on the verge of collapse, at least from an outside perspective. They put in Owner, who is a jungler. He has been a phenomenal for this team. His communication with T1's lanes has really influenced the way that they've played. And so they themselves as a team have improved incrementally throughout summer. They faced Tom1 in the summer finals and they lost pretty handily. They took a game, but it was kind of a weird draft and one of those situations where they really, really snowballed early. But even in that series, you never felt like Tamwon didn't have that series under control. And the thing that actually surprised me about this semifinal was how much T1 had improved that they could really take it to Tamwon. Because I thought this was going to be another case of Tamwon just knowing exactly how T1 play. You know, every team has a specific play style things and repetitive things that they do. T1 really likes to fight over this objective called Rift Herald, like on in a very exact timer. And other teams, including EDG, who was in their Worlds group, have exploited this as well. But T1 came with really good draft preparation and draft responses. The whole Tamwon T1 series was incredibly good. And so the thing that surprised me wasn't that T1 didn't win. It was that they performed so well compared to what they were even from their first Worlds game to that series. Like the improvement, even in that short amount of time, was phenomenal.
And we saw it's a rematch of LCK Summer Playoffs, which are less than 2 months ago, or right over 2 months ago now, but less than 2 months ago, the semifinal matchup, and that looked, to Emily's point, a lot more one-sided for Damwon. I would say if you look at sort of the Korean representatives at this World Championship, like Damwon are the most consistent. They are, especially because they're a reigning world champion, and that usually doesn't bode very well for a lot of teams. You win a world championship and then you fall off, or the meta changes or whatever, and you kind of come back to the next one. Like it has not felt like we are in sort of, I guess, the T1 era, the SK Telecom era of past, where like, you had the one team that would like always figure it out and come back to the next world championship a year later, maybe with a few roster changes, and they'd still be the best that there was, right? Like that is not so much common anymore. But Damwon is that. They do feel sort of dynastic in a lot of the way that they are, because they are a consistent team in the game. It seems like they know what works for them, and they play their own game, and they make you play theirs. And I think that's why at any time you watch them, it's I mean, their games do have moments of like something falls apart and they have to rescue themselves. It happens to every team. But you know what? Like at the same time, I think that their games also they make you play the way they like to play a lot of the times, and then they just execute. Or they're just better than you. And I think that's the one thing about M1 that's why they're here. But I mean, yeah, to Emily's point, like, this T1 team has kind of turned it around. I think from like a fan perspective, everybody, like so long as he's still playing this game, Faker will be like a narrative device everybody likes to use and write about, because he's the most famous player in the world. He is the most successful player in the game's history. Like, he'll continue to kind of be the face of the game, even if Damwon wins this Worlds and next Worlds and the Worlds after. Like, there's something about Faker and his legacy that will continue on throughout sort of the history of this game. He'll be somebody that we all look back at as like not a founding father exactly based off timing, but certainly somebody that, like, as the game rose in popularity, he was always there as like one of the game's most successful and most watched players. So I think a lot of people think of him that way even now. But it is impressive sort of the lineup that they have put around him and how it's grown even just in 2 months' time leading up to this tournament.
Yeah, you could say he's a legend. Well, anyway.
Yeah, he is a legend.
But yeah, no, in this particular case, I think that, y'all were saying that the series between the two teams last week was really good. Can the finals measure up, especially given that, you already had kind of the team with all the storylines, or at least a lot of the kind of like long-term storylines coming in, lose and drop out of the tournament. Is this going to be like an intriguing match on its own terms, or is it kind of expected to be like maybe a little bit of a blowout?
So I think it's interesting narratively from two perspectives that we've already touched upon. Tamwon trying to establish that they can win another Worlds title when no other team but SK Telecom / T1 has been able to do so. And that would be massive, considering that the general opinion sways and vacillates wildly based on who wins Worlds in terms of that region. And while I might take issues with that specifically, I think a lot of people have been weirdly down on South Korea, despite the fact that they've still had the strong, like incredibly strong teams, despite the fact that they've obviously had incredibly strong individual players, and despite the fact that they, going into this tournament, had the reigning world champion. So it would be another mark of, South Korea's dominion over League of Legends as a whole, but also an incredible achievement for Tamwon, who, again, to reiterate, still have some of the key pieces that got them here, from Korean challengers all the way to the LCK, and then, possibly to multiple Worlds titles. Winning a Worlds title is so difficult on its own, never mind winning one twice, because of how volatile the meta is from year to year and how much the game changes, even from patch to patch, never mind from an entire year later. And then for Edward Gaming, I cannot stress enough how shocking it is to see them in a Worlds final, just based on the conversation around this team. And that has nothing to do with the individual players. I already said, based on how the meta has evolved, EDG were definitely the most well-suited team to play in the current metagame of all the LPL representatives, based on like what has happened at Worlds. I think the big thing for EDG is, like, obviously they're not like, we're just happy to be here, because they really, really want to win. But in terms of like their fans, like I've seen so many EDG fans who are just incredibly sticky and so just stuck to this team even when they have failed, and they have failed spectacularly on multiple occasions. Just seeing the outpouring of them making a Worlds final was amazing. And like I remember taking a nap after, because of the time zones work. I'm in Pacific time. I remember taking a nap and waking up and be like, wow, I can't believe Edward Gaming is actually in the Worlds final. And once again, it has nothing to do with the capability of the players. So I think for this specific team to come and win a Worlds title would be just absolutely massive for this organization, absolutely massive for these players that we've already called out, especially Scout, Mako, and one player that we didn't talk about, who is Flandra, their top laner, who has been around for a really long time, but only joined EDG this year. Previously, he was on an organization called LNG or Snake, who also made it. So it's weird. As soon as he left the team, he made it with EDG, and then that organization made it on their own to Worlds. But then, as for whether it's close, all this narrative buildup, I think Tamwon are going to win pretty handily, because Edward Gaming are not as good at objective setups. They're really good at team fighting, but they don't set up as well around objectives. And additionally, again, the way the metagame has shifted, Tamwon was so responsible for that, right? Like they have everyone playing to their metagame, and they also, especially in the T1 series, I thought brought out a lot of interesting things in draft that tell me that they should be able to match up and counter a lot of things that EDG like to do, from draft to the way they set up for objectives in game. Additionally, Edward Gaming look a lot worse when Mako is on Enchanter supports, which is basically like supports that do magic damage and focus more on the 2v2 instead of roaming and being tanky and kind of affecting other lanes on the map. It just basically changes the roam timers when he's in lane and when he's out of lane, and the entire team doesn't look as strong when he is not on tanky initiators and kind of controlling the map through roaming instead of contesting always in the bot lane. So I don't know if that's too in the weeds, but that is why I think Tamwon will win.
One point I just wanted to come back into that. Sorry, I know like we're both kind of going long here, but just to say, like Emily was talking about sort of the narrative that South Korea doesn't have it anymore. In 2018 and 2019, we got 2 Chinese European finals in both years. People seem to forget that before that we had 2 consecutive years of the exact same teams from South Korea playing in the finals. The 2 years prior to that, and then we had a South Korean world championship or world champion last year. The exact same team we're talking about now.
Yeah.
This is I think people sort of like overestimated their downfall as a region. I mean, sure there were some issues, and the teams that were making it at the World Championship didn't have sort of the gusto to make it all the way to the final. But I mean, it's still one of the best regions in the history of the game. I would say that this final will probably go similar to last year's final, if I had to guess, which was the other Chinese team that no one expected to make it to the final. They were not the favorite of the Chinese representatives that made it last year. Suning is who I'm talking about. A lot of people coming into it, including I think the both of us, thought Top Esports would be the one that would really make it all the way. They had a great 2020, and they didn't. They ultimately didn't. They lost out in the semifinals, and Suning went on to be the one. And then they won a game, but more or less systematically got crushed by Damwon for the rest of the series. I would say that's probably, we're getting a little bit of, my prediction would be we're going to get a little bit of a repeat. Another, just Tim Lee's point, systematic crushing. Just they'll play the game as you should. It's at its core, it's a tower defense game, and they're going to play it like it, and play around the objectives and whittle them down one by one and beat them. Even if EDG does take a game, my guess would be it is off of that. They catch somebody or they catch a few people in an awkward position, and they run you over in one team fight.
Game.
Yeah.
Sometimes they have a lot of happy games where they just kind of draft weird, and they might not do it in finals, but I think that's the only way that it's a 3-1, unless EDG fix a lot of issues in a really short amount of time.
The two regions too just have a very different play style from one another. Korea does like that sort of like, we'll whittle you down little by little, and finally we'll just step on your neck. And that, that's the way that this team plays. So
So how would you describe China's playstyle in comparison?
Emily,
so I'll go. There was a really good Twitter thread on this done by Clement Chu, who translated and basically did an entire Twitter thread on like Chinese terms in League of Legends for LPL teams. But I'll explain it like this. One of my friends was talking to one of the LPL coaches, and he brought up the term fighting for nothing. And whenever we say, like on the LCS broadcast, for example, they're fighting for nothing, right? It means that a team fight is happening between multiple champions at a place and at a time on the map where it doesn't quote unquote have to. So it's not around an objective. It's not for any sort of specific control point. It's just they run into each other, and for some reason, we're all fighting each other in River. There's nothing to be gained from it. We're just fighting. And so he brought that up in conversation to this LPL coach, and the LPL coach responded, I don't get that. That's a very Western thing to say, because you're never fighting over nothing. You're always fighting for something. You're fighting for gold. You're fighting for item advantages. You're fighting for vision control. You're always fighting for a specific reason, right? There's no such thing as fighting for nothing. And so while I think a lot of the LPL teams, EDG included, are not the stereotypical, like, we're going to fight you all the time, it doesn't matter, like Chinese aggression, blah, blah, blah. Like, they're not that stereotype. They're not that far, but they will fight a lot more often. And they don't necessarily see fighting over an objective as the only reason to start a team fight. And if I had to pinpoint a major difference between the way that LPL teams see the game and the way that other teams from other regions see the game, it would be that.
Yeah, to make like a kind of to another game that I've covered before, in Super Smash Brothers Melee, there are these players that are sort of like players out of feel and habit. Like, they're not the people who's like, are going to go into any practice tool or whatever and like write down frame data and like figure out how, like, when do I exactly need to push this button, and like figure out from a mathematical perspective. Those are a lot of the Korean teams. Like, they know how to play, they know when to play, they know times, they track it. They play very like systematically, kind of a little bit by the book, right? And they're just very good at that. And then by inverse, though, you have like the player that kind of feels off of, like, plays off instinct and feel. And people like Mango, Cloud9's Super Smash Brothers player is probably the best example out of this. Dude's not the guy studying, but he's played the game so damn much, he knows exactly his moment. He knows when to pick his spots, and he doesn't win all the time, but when he does, it's really exciting because he makes it fun for everyone to watch, because he will kind of like try to capitalize on a specific moment and, would like hit you where it hurts, and it's really flashy and it's really exciting. And I would say EDG kind of fits a little bit into that. Like, they like have their moments and they are very exciting when they happen, and it is very flashy. And, it doesn't necessarily make perfect mathematical sense in terms of timing on the map and when you're going to play to fight to get a tower or fight to get a Rift Herald or fight to get a dragon or a Baron. But it works. There's a world where it works, and sometimes it does, and they beat you.
Hmm.
And
Maybe
so
maybe
yeah,
there's a worlds where it works.
yeah. There you
Uh,
go.
Really quick question on the subject of narratives too. As we're talking about Edward Gaming having a fan base that supported them even when they don't make it to the final two every year, they stop at quarterfinals. I'm thinking about the teams that never make it like anywhere close to to the top four even, or top two, the North American teams that have such loyal fan bases. I know a lot of my friends support like Team Liquid and TSM every year and are very disappointed every year, despite hoping for a better outcome. I'm wondering if you can say a little bit about why North America never seems to win Worlds.
There are
I
so many
mean, this
theories on this.
yeah, this entire thing like could take up like not even it. You wouldn't need an hour. You'd need
Hmm.
like an entire series focusing on different aspects of why like why North America sucks. And I don't think I mean I think the big thing is there's not one reason, right? Like people give a lot of reasons every single year, and it's not that they're incorrect, it's that they're all fragments of a much larger picture that's really difficult to solve. And like some of the stuff is not even within Riot's purview. So like stuff like the fact that the US is a massive country with not good internet infrastructure and not great like not a really strong PC culture across all socioeconomic income brackets. And by that, I mean, if you live in China, if you live in South Korea, you can go to a PC bong or an internet cafe, regardless of how rich or poor you are, basically, and play League of Legends, which is a free to play game. So all you have to do is pay the small amount of money that it takes to, occupy a computer in an internet cafe for however long. Um, and so you don't really have that in the US. So first of all, you have that affecting the player base, and obviously that is entirely out of Riot's purview, right? And then you have stuff like only this past year did I see a lot more larger names starting to talk about amateur and academy players in North America, which are like the feeder leagues into the league championship series, or the LCS, which is North America's like major region tournament. Um, there's the fact that everyone complains about ping because the servers are in Chicago and most teams are in LA, and so like there's a lot of individual server issues, and obviously like that is the thing that the pros are going to focus on, right? Because that's the thing that they feel the most strongly, is that when they go to compete in Europe, or they go to compete in South Korea, or they go to compete on the Chinese super server, the ping there is like incredibly low compared to what you would get playing out of Los Angeles from to a Chicago server. There's just so much stuff. I mean, those are kind of the three major massive issues that feed into a lot of other things, like League of Legends. I think for it to be something in North America that is a lot more stable, you would need to have just so many things: easier access to the game for a wider amount of people, better servers, better things in place to help pro players come up. Because like again, in South Korea and in China and now in Europe with the European regional leagues, you have very easy avenues for a player to go from being in a solo queue phenom to a trainee on a team or a roster to some sort of European regional league, for example, if you're in Europe, and then to an LEC team. Or in, the recent laws in China will change this a bit, but in China, they used to just sign trainees at an incredibly young age and just have them on trainee teams, and then they'd go to the Lowell Development League, which is their secondary league, and then to the LPL once they turn 17. Similarly to in South Korea, you have especially large orgs like T1 and Gen.G having trainees from a very young age. So it's a lot. I don't even know where you want me to start. That's probably not the answer you wanted. You wanted something easy, like players are lazy, which is what
There we
everyone
go.
says.
That
I think
explains.
there's a lot of layers to it. I will say one that I think particularly is on the managerial side of things among these North American organizations. There's no patience. There's an impatience problem with these people. So, and it's related to a lot of things, but I would say it's related to the brands and the business of esports partly as well. So, a lot of these brands, I would say, with maybe the exception of TSM and Cloud9, and 100 Thieves, that's 3 out of the 10 LCS organizations, to be relevant and therefore to get more sponsorship dollars, you have to win, right? The other 3, they have 100 Thieves has a very sort of, much bigger influencer culture around their organization, which they are trying to like kind of bridge the gap between their competitive team who won this past LCS championship with the influencer culture as well. If you see some of the content they're doing, they're trying to like mend the two together. And then Cloud9 and TSM are 2 of the oldest teams in this league who have had really smart and in some cases overlapping person that worked at one and went to the other. Really smart marketing executives that have figured out how to build sort of a rabid fan base that like kind of sticks with you, right? And has this like, long tail. They've been a fan of the team for 6+ years. So they've stuck with you throughout all of this, right? They are the exception to the rule. The other 7, though, including Team Liquid, who I would say are a very popular esports team, like kind of ebbs and flows. Their popularity ebbs and flows off of winning a domestic championship, not an international championship, or being a domestically competitive team. And so you see now, of the 3 teams that North American teams that competed at Worlds, there are already rumors that 2 of them, Cloud9 and Team Liquid, may blow up this offseason and make really big roster changes. And they were just at the World Championship 3 weeks ago. Like, there's this impatience that like, oh, like we can't be bad for a year. We got to continue to be relevant. We got to continue to win. And it's like, okay, well, I mean, you look at teams like 100 Thieves who are investing in some of their young talent, like in the, kind of the academy system that they're building up within there, right? And they are, and now some of those academy players are like I've been hearing, some of them may get recruited to LCS teams, right? Because they've been kind of built up in the system to what Emily was saying that exists in other regions. But there is this impatience, and it's like, all right, well, we got to go sign, this guy from Europe that, was one of the best players in Europe. And we got to pay millions of dollars to buy him out of his contract. We got to pay him millions of dollars a year to be here. Oh, great. In the case of Perks, he's gone after a year. And it's just like, what the hell? Like there's this constant impatience, sort of the executives of the LCS. I think it's very specific to American capitalism in a lot of different ways. But yeah, I mean, that's also an issue among all kind of the other ones that Emily laid out. There is no right one answer, but it's one that to me is pretty glaring. Like people aren't willing to stick with players. There's a recycle culture. Oh, you didn't work out up for us. There's 50 other players that want a roster slot. We'll go sign one of them.
Well, yeah. So I mean, like you put it all in those terms, and I guess the question that sort of emerges from that to me is, when you're looking at that, are these issues in any foreseeable time frame surmountable such that a team from North America could actually like have a good chance of winning the finals or making it there? And then B, when they don't, if that never comes to pass, then like what is kind of the appeal of being a fan of any of these teams? Does it come from them being smart about like attracting influencers and building out their brands in other ways? Or is there like an element of, is there an enjoyable element just to cheering for like a losing team perpetually if they're from, where you're from?
Yeah, I don't know if there's one right answer to that. I mean, we're saying diversification and sort of like business ideals for some of these teams. I would point to like Immortals just announced in the past week that they're going to they're moving part of their headquarters to the Great Lakes area. They're going to set up shop partly in Detroit and then do like a bunch of like college level activations across that area, like the Pacific, or sorry, the Midwest. Great Lakes area, Midwest, and then also FlyQuest has been like sort of taken this approach of like, they're going to be the environmentally friendly team and do like community outreach and donations based off things that are related to their organization. They literally changed their logo to include a leaf inside of it. So like they're like, I think everybody's trying to figure out how do we make ourselves unique as a business other than just winning.
You've heard of junglers, but what about saving the rainforest?
No, you're good. That's a plausible campaign. I commend them for trying. I don't know if it's exactly either of them have like proved that it's worked quite yet, but I at least commend the effort so far. And yeah, I think that to your point about like why you root for a team, I think a lot of it does boil down to kind of even if it's not influencers, the personality of the people who are there. Like Bjergsen's now left TSM, but that's someone you could kind of like hit your flag on too. He's been a part of the organization since the end of 2013, beginning of 2014, and like to be like, oh, I really like that guy. I like what he's about. But now he's gone. And I think TSM will retain some of their fans, but like in the case of Cloud9, like their owner is quite Jack Etienne as CEO is quite forward facing, and people tend to like to hear from him and buy into kind of the culture that he's built, at least publicly, and what he's talking about it publicly. And so compared to like the Call of Duty League or the Overwatch League, where there is a city association, which I think has worked in some instances, some not worked in others. It's I think specific to League of Legends, it's really about sort of buying into the people and sticking with those people. And I would say that's been the case for a little bit. Echo Fox had a lot of fans, even though they were garbage in the game for a long period of time, because their owner was a former NBA player who's incredibly charismatic. So there you go.
That explains a lot. Yeah, a lot of my friends were just huge Double F fans, and yeah, Double F is one of the most successful players in North America, even if his team never won Worlds either. And he also retired last year.
Yeah, I guess that was kind of like in the first season of the Overwatch League when everybody was really into Dallas, even though they lost a lot. But they had like XQC for a little bit, and then like other players with actual like names and reputations. Which I think is like interesting how the lines between players and influencers continue to blur, and like some teams are fine with just having players. Others are like, well, we're also going to have this separate like raft of influencers that help our team make money. But yeah, a thing that I think to kind of swerve the conversation a little bit, Shannon, I know that you wanted to get into like player practice schedules and stuff. And yeah, I think I find that especially interesting because earlier y'all were talking about the kind of delineation between those two kinds of players where like some are very attuned to, like knowing all these timers and being very precise in all of these things. And others kind of like feel their way through the game more and have just instincts that they've honed through play. And so in either of these cases, what kind of practice schedule, what kind of like consistent practice leads to players having these styles and being able to hone them to the point that they're at a championship level?
It's a hard question. I think one thing I've heard from a lot of North American teams is like, this is mostly resolved. There was a period of time where like players were independent contractors, and therefore the work schedules they were being given were illegal.
Wonderful.
And I would say most of them now. Riot issued a health insurance mandate like 5 or 6 seasons ago that kind of fixed that, because to have health insurance you need to be an employee, and it made a lot of teams kind of get with the program in both North America and Europe and start making these players employees. But again, there are labor laws. And I can say with some good assurance that some of the other regions, the labor laws are not exactly identical. The sort of compensation structure and everything else isn't either. But I do think this constant juggle of like North American teams, not wanting to get in trouble, but also trying to put in as much time as they can. I think the real issue though is it's not a time thing. I don't think if you had a North American player play, let's say 18 hours a day and sleep 6 hours overnight, I don't think that magically fixes the issue. I actually think it's a practice efficiency issue more than anything else. It's how you practice, not how long you practice. And I again, kind of back to what we were just talking about with sort of what is the issue. I think there is no right answer to how you efficiently practice. It's based on your players and how they get the most out of their practice. It's based on your coaches and how they structure your practices. And it's not just about the amount of hours. And I think it's there's a balance. I think that some teams, I mean, hell, we've seen anything from a college football coach being hired to be like a quote unquote performance coach early. Like that was the thing that happened 6 years ago. Clemson, a college football coach, assistant coach was hired by a team for whatever. And then, and so we've seen like the kind of the traditional sports coach come in and give it a go. That didn't really work. We've seen teams like kind of flirt but not effectively do like mental wellness and physical wellness as part of their regimen, so like physical therapists and either psychiatrists or counselors or whoever, people in the mental health field, licensed in the mental health field to practice, which is an important integral part. I think every player should probably be in therapy because they're probably dealing with a lot of things that are hard to deal with, fame, team dynamics, a lot of other things that they need someone to talk to. I would encourage, if I was an agent, for my player to be in therapy. But yeah, and it's difficult, like I think that we've not really seen that realized in a way that's most beneficial in North America. We've seen some teams in other games do that effectively in Counter-Strike and other places. But that's not been realized to its fullest. So to me, like there's not a right answer to it. It's just, but I think back to the recyclable nature of some of these players. If you're not performing well or you're not feeling well, usually you just get kicked to the curb. And so there's this amount of pressure that you gotta get it right, and you gotta work your ass off, and you gotta play as much as humanly possible outside your normal scrimmage hours, and it can be kind of toxic, to be honest. It is a little hard.
Yeah, I guess that would also encourage you to, like, if you are struggling, if you're having trouble mentally or physically, to mask it instead of admitting it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have had many a candid conversation with a player who's in physical or mental pain, and it's not going to say that to their team. I can tell you that much, because they are afraid of just being bounced instead of being provided help.
Man, that's terrible.
It's hard. Yeah, and it's something that I feel like I would love to see a team figure out how to make this work. But I mean, it also costs a lot of money, and that's the perspective. If you want to take the devil's advocate, it's like, oh, how much is it going to cost for us to employ the people to do this stuff, to help them? And a lot of them don't want to make that financial commitment either. So I'm on the side of provide it, and put it in your budget every year to pay the people to help your players, but at the same time, that's unrealistic where we're at right now as an industry and a scene, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, our from chat, our coworker Mikhail is asking about these sort of like broad professionalization of things like counseling and physical therapy and whatnot in esports. He said, in short, does it appear to be working mostly, or is it all over the place? He said some of the stuff that he's seen, he's been skeptical of, in terms of just, I think, the way the teams integrate these practices in hopes of, maybe helping players, or like, I think when we're talking skepticism, I've seen some instances where it feels more like a marketing gimmick than it does like an actual thing that they're doing to help players.
Also, just like last year, I think when Double Lift, I think it brought it to my attention when I think he was on this like Twitch stream, and there's probably so many of them at this point that nobody can remember exactly what this was, but like he brought up that he had left his team to go to another one, partly because there was a lot of like mental health issues on that team, and people were upset with each other and fighting, and it was just not being treated, and he felt like this is all just not being discussed. And so like this year I happened to ask Faker what he thought about that, and he was like, this is not my business. It's a different team, I have no comment. But I also like tried to ask the other possible winners of this year's Worlds, what they thought about mental health and how important it is in trying to win this championship. And it seemed like people who had already started spiraling and doubted themselves, and they were not in a good place, also happened to like be knocked out of the tournament quite early on. So I don't know if like you have other thoughts about this, but like mental health and worlds, and their rigorous training schedule was all like clashing into one thing. But
I mean, what I'll say about this tournament specifically that I feel like not a lot of people are talking about is that since it had to be pivoted from China so quickly, the entire tournament is compressed. So if you were having any sort of mental difficulty or internal issue on your team, you have a lot less time to do absolutely everything, which means that the pressure and the turnaround time is nothing. Like, for example, FPX, and they were obviously struggling with something that was not meta related, although their read on the meta was absolutely terrible. They, that you don't just collapse because of there's something else going on that team. They were in Group A, so they had, and this is not making an excuse for them, I'm just pointing out the turnaround time. They had a day between their end of like the first round robin of groups to the second. They had one day off between that. And so, like, what are you going to do for that day? You're already struggling. Are you going to practice? Because not only do you have internal issues, but your meta read was bad going into the tournament. So you do need to, like, you actually need to fix like gameplay stuff. And on top of that, there's something going on in your team that you need to address that is happening that is not great. And so you have a day, you have 24 hours, if that, to figure out what do you even prioritize in that short amount of time to fix as much stuff as you can to be able to possibly make it through to the next stage. So I think for this tournament specifically, the turnaround time was also just a lot shorter than other tournaments. But any major tournament is going to be incredibly mentally and physically draining. Like, even as a broadcaster, my days, if you include like me getting up, going through COVID testing and all that stuff, like my broadcast days were anywhere, I think, between like 10 to like 14 hours in total. Which is fine. Like, I'm not like complaining about it. I'm just saying, I'm just trying to give people an idea of like, if you're a team and you have to split your time at this already truncated in time length tournament, like what are you going to focus on? So if you're already having any sort of mental issues on the team prior to even arriving at the tournament, I feel like that is going to be exacerbated by the fact that it's like just an incredibly high pressure environment. But I mean, I also don't think these like issues are exclusive to esports either. And certainly not League of Legends. So
I would say they are I think there's been plus minuses. I'd be really curious, and you guys are two good journalists that write about sort of broader issues in the esports and gaming industry, so maybe something you can track down. I would be really curious on Riot's take on the difference between these two events, this World Championship and the one prior, both done during the pandemic, versus the ones prior to that. One thing that even just as a journalist covering some of the past events was really difficult, and I'm sure Emily can attest to this, and this being in the same boat. It was really draining to do like sort of the country world tour or like country tour, the format, like having to go from this leg of the tournament to this leg of the tournament, fly in between, get travel, check into a new hotel, go cover, and I can't imagine the players felt a lot of that same sort of stressor too. The fact that you'd have to go from like the last U.S. World Championship was San Francisco, Chicago to New York to LA. And, they're like, that's a slog, basically, if you are a player that does the entire thing. But now it's been all one centralized location out of necessity. And I'm sure that's maybe a little bit easier. It removes the travel stressor, but it adds the COVID stressor. And some of the other things, especially last World Championship before the vaccine, the really this like very much difficult issue of like, how do we make sure nobody has an infection and causes this entire thing to blow up, basically, in the middle of the event, and and building like basically a bubble system inside of China, last year. And I would be really curious to both hear from a player perspective and an organizer perspective how those two things contrast, because I think there are plus minuses to both, clearly. And I think it is really hard. And these are also one thing I just wanted to point out. These are really young people.
Mhm.
Like I struggle sometimes. I'm 24. I've been doing this for 7 years. But I struggle sometimes to level with some players because I would like consider myself mature for my age, and I am their age in a lot of instances, especially some of the more veteran players in the LCS. When talking to some of them, it's hard for me to level with them, but then I have to like take back and step back for a moment and go, they're 24. Like if they like were just out of college, this is like maximum 3 years, right? Basically, right? Like 3 years post college. They're still really young, and they don't have life experiences to understand themselves all the time, to understand what works for them. How do they how do they cope with that level of stress? How do they get through it? If they're feeling in pain, what makes them feel better? Right? Like what can they do? Like whether it's extra rest or whatever it may be, or like to make themselves feel better. They don't have that life experience, and it's difficult. But and then there's also this like giant pressure of being famous and also potentially losing your job if you don't perform well enough. Like there's so many layers to this onion of like being that young and also having that amount of pressure. And talking to some of these players, I know all of them feel that like pretty frequently. I don't think there's any one of them that their pro player experience is super squeaky clean. I'm sure they've had something in their pro player experience that's just tough.
Yeah, that was one thing I heard from FunPlus Phoenix when I spoke to them earlier, like last month, is that they just felt the pressure was getting to them, and that since they're performing poorly and everyone expected them to win again, and try to be the next team to win, like the first Chinese team to win 2 worlds, they just felt crushed under that pressure. And also, I think when you're talking about COVID restrictions at like the Iceland Worlds tournament, it reminds me of I think some of our coworkers at the Washington Post were sent to cover the Tokyo Olympics this year. And instead of like going out to eat some sushi at a restaurant, they were stuck inside and they couldn't really go anywhere. And the same goes for these Worlds players who everyone I spoke to has not had a chance to tour Iceland. They have been maybe at most walking around their hotel, and that's it. So it's not really a chance to travel, to enjoy travel, but just to be in a space and compete. And
Well, it's very fish out of water too. Like, what are you gonna do to de-stress in a foreign country where you don't know what the hell you're doing, right? Like, even if they were allowed outside, like, what are they gonna do, right? Like, there's not like something that's like comfortable,
Mhm.
Like if they were playing in LA, in the case of the LCS players, I'm sure there's something that's relax a beach trip or whatever it may be, like a theme park, something that's like I don't know to them like de-stressing, just to use like generic examples, but yeah, you're kind of a fish out of water in a place you don't know, and there's always some sort of layers to that as well, which I don't think you can deny. Like has some sort of game impact, even if it's not massive.
Right. Yeah, no, that seems like all the more reason for teams to, authentically try to focus on mental health. Because, I mean, at the very least, if you have team infrastructure behind you, a thing they could do is in some way, shape, or form bring with you something that would, be more comforting. Try to recreate an environment that is conducive to,
Yeah,
better mental health or people being more calm so that they can, I mean, if for no other reason than to play better. I mean,
but
obviously, there
It
should be more reasons than that, but,
it sounds really simple, but I know at previous world tournaments, and I don't know if this has gone on in the COVID era. Actually, I should have asked. But the I know a lot of the Chinese and South Korean teams learned that wherever they were, they would make sure that they would bring food that they knew they were comfortable with. So like they would just bring
yeah,
like giant boxes of like noodles, or they'd make sure that they would know specific restaurants and stuff to go to, or they'd bring someone who could cook for them, or just the comfort of having some sort of stability going from where you live to where you're performing, they found was actually like incredibly important. And it sounds so stupid to just pack a giant cardboard box of like instant ramen, but like whatever, you know what, if it works, like it works.
yeah.
And so I know that's something that teams had figured out, I think the first time I really saw people talking about it was like 2015, 2016. But I know that, you know, from now on, there has always kind of been that effort from especially the South Korean and Chinese teams to make sure that their players are surrounded by some sort of like comfortable food that they're used to.
Yeah, I feel like that's incredibly important to Eastern countries where like you're not, you know, finding as much. It's not in abundance, right? Like you're kind of like restaurants, etc., are not in abundance in some of the cities they would travel to. And in the case of like, I don't know, I would venture to say the LCS players kind of, some of them probably eat like trash, because it's America and it's LA and there's garbage food everywhere around you, and there's garbage food everywhere in the world. But in the case of like, you know, having something that's kind of your cultural food and cultural thing, it is kind of hard to find it. So I've heard some of that too, and it's not exclusive to League. I interviewed Evo champion Arslan Ash after he won, and he was like telling me how sick he had been to his stomach the entire tournament because he couldn't find anything halal. And I was like, wait, there is somewhere in Las Vegas. You have to go out of your way, but there is somewhere. I promise you. Go here, dude. Like, and he's like, oh, I didn't know about that. I was like, there is something. I promise. It's not exactly Pakistani, but it's the similar. Like, go have a good meal, dude. Like, enjoy yourself. Yeah, it's difficult. I think also, just back to Mikhail's point about skepticism, there is this like role. I think it's kind of BS. I don't know if I'm allowed to actually curse here, but I think it's kind of BS that teams right now are like, they've tried to blend mental health and physical health into this one role that they like generically call a performance coach a lot of the time. And it's like, those are two very different things. Someone who's like a, you know, either physical therapist or involved in orthopedics, like, you know, and has like the understanding of like muscle tensions and repetitive motion injuries, like that person's probably not also trying to help you with your brain function. But they like a lot of teams try to blend it into this one thing to save cost and whatever, and it can be quite performative in my experience that I've seen. You know, because really they should be two separate roles, and in some cases, depending on the size of the team, there should probably be two of each of them, and you know, one person so they can kind of work off of each other. But it's been this like blend of like one person, and we've seen there's not a nice way to put this, snake oil salesman take advantage of this blended hybrid role, and these people do not know what the hell they are doing, and it just makes it worse for the players, not better for the players.
So
Right.
you can't curse here. But also
Well, not.
one last question. I before, I know you probably have to go, but just I'm wondering, you know, is that a reason? Is everything we've discussed a reason why esports athletes tend to retire like at an early age, like 27, 28? We've talked about Grayson, we talked about Double Lift. They are retired now. I already asked Faker when he's retiring. He didn't say, but he's 25 as well, so that's coming up. So
I know there's actually been a bunch of former low pro league, so Chinese players who've been interviewed, because even more specifically in LPL, it seemed like the players were, you know, burning out a lot faster or retiring at a younger age. A lot of the time in the very early days, before there was like specific age caps, they were also starting at a younger age as well. Like they were actually starting in the professional league at a younger age until I believe the mandate came out that you had to be 17 or older. So you have a lot of pros that have actually spoken about this in LPL, because there's this clash between like unaddressed mental health issues, unaddressed physical health issues, especially in the very early days of League of Legends. And then additionally, the massive amount of pressure it takes to play in that league specifically, because it is an incredibly vibrant domestic league with a lot of fans. So it's just like a lot larger. There's a lot more pressure. And so it goes both sides. You'll have a lot more people cheering for you, but you also have a lot more people cheering against you. And I know, like, believe it was former top laner PDD who talked about this and why some players retire early. I know Uzi, who was wanted to, he's like one of the most famous AD carries in the world. He has said that when he went to see a doctor, they said that his arm was like the arm of like a 40-year-old. So it's very similar, obviously a different motion, but very similar to how like essentially every time you pitch as a baseball player, you're essentially destroying your arm because you're using it as like a fulcrum and you're putting so much force into that and doing that over and over again. So I think that's a lot of things that people don't think about because it's like, oh, you're just sitting in your chair playing video games, bro. Like, why are you, like you're not exerting any sort of physical thing. And then Uzi I specifically also got diagnosed with diabetes. So the reason why he actually did end up retiring was because the medication he was on, he felt like it didn't give him enough response time, and he felt like really sluggish and stuff. And so there's been rumors of him coming back, but I just wanted to bring him up because he is someone who's talked about like physical and mental health issues. And so I think it is, again, like not all that much different in terms of what I see in a lot of professional traditional sports. A lot of mental health issues go undiagnosed or ignored for as long as you can play. And then once your body breaks down, no one cares, which is another whole issue. So I do think that I do think it obviously happens in esports. And it's not conducive, or it's not limited to any one country or region or team. It's something that affects everyone across the board. And it's a combination of, the physical pressure, the mental pressure, whether you get help from your team, whether you don't get help from your team, how young you are, whether, like, I mean, I know people, again, also ignore this, but like another thing that happens every single year is you essentially have to relearn the game. And so a lot of times when people are just like, oh, why does this player suck now? It's actually that the entire requirements for their position changed within a year because of patch changes. So like longevity between year to year to year is also just something that's incredibly impressive, which again is why Faker is the best player who has ever played this game ever, because what he's been able to do and the level he's been able to play at consistently for multiple years is just absolutely bonkers and impressive.
Well said.
All right. Well, I think that Shannon was saying that you probably have to go. So I think that might be a good place to wrap up this segment. So yeah, with that said, thank you to both of you for taking this time to talk to us, come on the show, do all that fun stuff. And yeah, I guess talk to you at some other point.
Yeah, thank you both. That was so nice. I feel like there's so much more to talk about. We'll have to do this again.
We'll have to do like 12 separate episodes just going into why North America can't seem to win.
Let's go.
But yeah, no. Before you go, if either of you want to, let people know where they can find you or plug anything or whatever, go for it.
I am at Jacob Wolf on Twitter, and then .esports.com is where you'll find my work, and I think that's mostly it.
Yeah, for me, you can check out my Twitter at League of Emily. I hopefully will be in LCS broadcast next year as well. So that is where you'll be able to find me then.
All right. Well, awesome. So for the people watching, we're going to transition to another segment now, but our esteemed guests are going to take off. All right. Awesome. Wow, that was the smoothest transition we've ever had. So I'm going to ruin it by acknowledging it. In any case, so yeah, we are now onto the segment where I think for the handful of people who've stuck around are probably familiar with this by this point. We're going to run through some of the other big stories of the week, of which there were many this week. This was a bonkers news week.
It's not over yet. Oh, did I just jinx it?
Oh no. Yeah, tomorrow's going to be like the most ridiculous day ever now. But yeah, so to begin, a story that Shannon, you did a lot of reporting on, is that Blizzard has already lost its first ever female co-leader after just a few months, which is crazy because like she was only, appointed to that position a few months ago as part of Blizzard's kind of ongoing efforts to deal with the sexism and harassment issues that have pervaded the company for many years and only recently came to light. And now she's already out and seemingly, yeah, like it's a strange thing because on one hand, she said like the move is not because she's without hope for Blizzard, quite the opposite. But then she was also talking about how like she wants to make an impact outside of Blizzard, and she's not really sure how she's going to do that yet. But she's going to work with Women in Games International, a nonprofit, and yeah, Blizzard's going to donate $1 million. It's just like these feel like conflicting threads though, because it's like, what better way would there be to help than to be at one of the biggest video game companies in the world and be leading it? Like it feels like if you read between the lines, she's not feeling maybe super hopeful about Blizzard's prospects, at least, in its current state.
Yeah, I mean, I talked to a bunch of current employees, and I quote some of them in this piece. I've been talking to more, and everyone's like, "This is very suspicious. This is very strange." And if she does have hope for Blizzard, then why is she leaving? And that's, they're just echoing what you're saying. And also, $1 million. Again, there's been so much talk of Bobby Kotick's salary and of how the fund of a million, I think it's like, I believe it's $18 million that Activision Blizzard would settle with the EOC. It was not enough money, so $1 million is smaller than $18 million and even less money. So yeah, it just, all of this reads very poorly for most employees that I've spoken to.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just like, it's just one of those things where, you know, I feel like it leads to further questions about kind of the state of Activision Blizzard's efforts to really rectify all of the issues that have come to light. Like, I mean, we've talked in previous weeks about how despite recent events and recent words from Bobby Kotick and him taking his pay cut and whatever, like it seems like Blizzard's main goal here has been to kind of get out of this or get away from this as quickly as possible, to just sort of make it go away, at least on the legal side of things. And so like, again, you can see all of their nice words, and speaking of nice words, I love this word, all of their puffery, um, but then the actual tangible things that are occurring don't don't really speak encouragingly of their overall progress. So
Yeah.
um
Yeah, again, this is like an active story. I'm still reporting it out, so I can't say too much more, but yeah, I mean,
mhm.
everything that you said is exactly what everyone is thinking about. And I mean, the other additional things I could talk about, I can't talk about yet. So yeah, it's just a really rough situation, and it doesn't look good for the company.
Yeah. Well, as ever, I think one important thing to keep in mind is that while on one hand things seem pretty dire right now, on the other hand, they've been dire for a long time. And while I think it's tempting for a lot of people to look at Blizzard and say, "Well, I guess that's it for Blizzard. They're doomed, and it's time to move on from being a fan of theirs or whatever." This is a point at which a lot of employees are, behind the scenes working very hard to make their workplace better, and like, in a way that is, I think, relative to Blizzard's past, pretty unprecedented. So, it's not like all hope is lost. It's more like um, it's important in these times to support those employees and to, ensure that if there is further funny business that occurs, to, rally around the employees that are working hard to make things better when they need that support, and to put pressure on Activision Blizzard to actually make things better as opposed to just do so performatively.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, I agree. There's a lot of changes that have happened. Like when Kotick wrote his letter saying he's taking a pay cut, and there are certain changes that he would make. I think people took that as a victory. So there's some positivity there, and there are some people who have left the company, resigned, or have just departed, and we don't know why. But that's after they were accused of misconduct, and so there has been a bit of cleaning house. Just that there are more people. Allegedly, there are more people that are still there
mhm.
right now, and there's just like high turnover. And we didn't even mention that Overwatch 2 and Diablo 4 are delayed. as well. But I think like when you go back in time and think about Diablo 3, there was a rough period for that game too, and it's just a moment in history that we're witnessing.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we will see how it all kind of turns out. Speaking of see how it all turns out, this is going to be a real leap. But I just wanted to quickly highlight a piece that our own Gene Park wrote about the metaverse because that's definitely one that's going to take a little bit to come to fruition. But yeah, Gene wrote an article recently about how, despite all of the recent talk of the metaverse from Facebook, that a lot of the things that they've been touting as their vision for the future came from video games, or rather, video games are way ahead of the curve on this front. And it's kind of a folly to be like, yeah, Facebook is, spearheading this. They're going to lead it. They renamed their company. Again, to use a word that I used earlier, it's very performative. Meanwhile, like the actual building blocks of whatever all of this is have come from video games. Roblox, for example, is a big one, an enormous one, both in terms of like what it's accomplished and also in terms of sheer audience size, because that is far and away one of the biggest games in the world, and yet horrendously undercovered. I guess we should do something about that. But yeah, um, and then yeah, like some even more interesting examples, like Assassin's Creed Origins, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, offer convincing, well-researched. How do you say that word?
Facsimiles.
I've read it in books a million times, and I've always been like,
I don't know if we I don't know if we spelled it correctly there. Okay, we should probably fix
no,
that.
that's no good. Well, anyway, Washington Post, folks, we're very professional. But yeah, of life over 2,000 years ago in historical tour features, like yeah, there are all these sort of building blocks that video games have come up with, and so whatever Facebook is doing is woefully behind the curve. And also, again, I'm a metaverse skeptic, so I don't even think any of it's going to work. But it is worth pointing to the fact that this is video games domain. Yeah, which goes to this next point, which is this. Did you see this like abysmal tweet or this abysmal like not
Oh,
tweet, the tweet's
the
fine.
Bloomberg article
Yeah, the
about
Bloomberg article about like
Mario.
yeah, NFT Mario Kart, which is like the most dystopian thing I've seen in my life. That's not true. I live in the world in 2021.
It's
I see more dystopian
hilarious.
things every day, but it's so funny.
Yeah, please read it. It's really funny.
Yeah, so this is like an envisioning of like, because the metaverse I think is tied in pretty prominently at this point with the idea of NFTs being like a way that will show digital ownership of goods or whatever. So this is like somebody envisioning what Mario Kart would be like under this new NFT metaverse regime, and it's like, imagine being able to earn money by playing Mario Kart. That, oh man, another word that I'm not good at with that. Indefatigable.
Indefatigable.
Indefatigable. Yeah, whatever. Nintendo spin-off series from the pre-internet Super Mario. You wouldn't have to be all that good at it, which already, what? Why would we? Okay, but anyway. Also, wait a minute. Sorry. I've got to add something to this too. You don't have to be good at Mario Kart. That's not the point of Mario Kart. The point of Mario Kart is to like there are all these items that can even the playing field. It's infuriating if you're good at it because somebody will just hit you with a blue shell or strike you with lightning. Also, yes, shown in chat, we are just talking to ourselves. That's the second segment of this show. Like every time we do, a wrap up where we talk about the news of the week. If you're here for the guests, they left. Sorry. There'll be more guests next week though, 4 p.m. Tune in. But anyway, you wouldn't have to play it 24/7. Thank God. I think Mario Kart you already don't, so that's silly. Because in this mind experiment, you get to be Mario for as long as you like. You get to be him because you own him.
You have to think
which is so grim.
This is Bloomberg speaking to non-gamers and to speaking to people who maybe picked up one video game back in the 80s and then was like, I'm too busy now. So yeah, that's where this is coming from, and you just have to kind of like envision that mind space somehow.
I mean, yeah, but even by that standard, this is deranged. Yeah, your Mario's an NFT. He's impossible to duplicate. You and you alone own him. And because you own Mario, your go-kart is always better and faster than the ones piloted by other familiar faces in the Mushroom Kingdom like Luigi, Toad, and Princess Peach. Also untrue. In Mario Kart, Mario is definitely not the fastest. He's got like the most mid-tier stats. But anyway, so off you go, earning the kingdom's digital money. Mario coins, let's call them. No, let's not call them that. I hate that.
This is
given
pure
Mario,
fantasy, actually.
it's astounding, man. It's so good though. Given market economics, you might have to pay more for NFT Mario than say NFT Peach. Wow, that's sexist. But then you'd also earn more because here in the Mushroom Kingdom, Mario is the fastest player. Again, he's not. When you step out of the game and back into your day job, you still own Mario. I think Nintendo owns Mario, but when you start playing again, Mario is there waiting for you, waiting to earn Mario coins. The way that they like put periods and punctuation in that
It's
sentence makes it sound even scarier than
it's
it actually
creepy. It's
is.
it's very scary. Mario is maybe creeping up on you in the corner, looking at you. Um, yeah, I've been talking to NFT folks, recently,
Mhm.
and even just people who are in gaming and not really understanding NFTs and wanting to get into NFTs, and they're not sure. They cannot explain to me whether or not you own Mario, or if you don't own Mario, Nintendo owns Mario, because it's a legal question and a blockchain question, and it's not something that they really get. But yeah, this will be a interesting subject to keep looking at. And
Yeah. It's very funny to me. And it's also, again, it's eternally one of those questions of like, as soon as you apply ownership to any element of a game outside of cosmetics, then how does that impact the, balance of the game and the ability of people to play it and enjoy it? And yeah, I mean, like, because there are already, pay to win schemes and things like that in video games. That's not new. Um, but at the same time, like something like this, where it's tied to tangible currency in this particular way, like stands to make that issue potentially worse or to incentivize even more like performance based kind of things that you can buy and whatnot. Although the other really funny thing to me here is that like, you know, I think the point of comparison they could have used here if they followed video games, which I don't think they do, is just amiibos, right? Like amiibos in Smash. You can have your own Mario with
mhm.
an amiibo and like build that up. And so like that can be fun. It's not really the main attraction, but like it exists already and it exists in a way that's arguably, kind of more fun for people. But you could have like a digital amiibo basically. Um
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
something like that.
that's how gaming companies are approaching NFTs, is they're treating them as, this nostalgia-based collectible that you can have in your pocket, and it shouldn't like it doesn't have to make money. It doesn't have
Mhm.
to be worth more after you purchase it. And so if it's a complete loss on your investment, it's not their problem. But yeah, that's kind of their approach so far that I've seen.
Right. Anyway, this is kind of what I was building to, which I think is a very good point that the New York Times made about the metaverse being tech's fear of missing out, which this is a really good summary. Um, Not missing out on the last next big thing is what made tech leaders and their companies what they are. Missing out on the next big thing, whatever it is not an option. Giving various promising and threatening trends a unifying name is more comforting from this view than contemplating the chaos of dozens of competing technologies being adopted by billions of people careening off in directions that even the most prescient visionaries will get only a little bit right, which is like totally what it is, right? Like, yeah, all these tech companies came out of being ahead of the game. And now it's, impossible to predict where things are going to go. And so, in lieu of being able to do that, companies are saying, we're going to will the next big thing into being before something else can become the next big thing. But it's this
Yeah.
like, oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. This take could apply to anything. You can say,
Mhm.
oh, like 10 years ago, Amazon, or 20 years ago, Amazon got into books, and then they started getting into hardware. They got into software. They got into cloud services. They got into
Mhm.
other countries. I think that's like every giant tech company. They have to try to get every possible opportunity on the table so they can
Right.
continue growing their stock and their stock price. So the metaverse is just one of the many other buzzy words out there, in addition to cryptocurrency and
Mhm.
esports, etc.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just interesting when you have, a bunch of companies say like we're going to recreate the architecture underlying the biggest communication tool in the history of human or in the history of humanity, um, in pursuit of being the next big thing. But will they succeed? Probably not. Will they make a thing in this vein happen? Oh, definitely. They've already put too much money into it to not. So, you know, we'll see
Yeah.
where it all goes. Anyway, video games. You might have heard of them. I don't know. They seem okay. But yeah, and other like big news this week, Take-Two canceled an unannounced $53 million game from Hangar 813, which is the developer of Mafia 3, a developer that has also been long suffering because they also had a lot of issues during the development of Mafia 3. I think they've had other projects get canceled too. So this feels like another blow to a studio that has been, not really having a great time as of late. But yeah, so the game would have been called Volt, or at least that was
Mhm.
the internal name for it. Would have been a third-person action game in the vein of Destiny. But yeah, it has been canceled. I guess like apparently internally the perception was that it was going well and like was good, but it just already cost way too
Mm.
much, and then current industry challenges would make it commercially unviable. And
Oh,
there I would assume numerous reasons to make that assumption, but in any case, it has been canceled.
yeah.
Which go ahead.
Oh, that's super interesting. I mean, I
Mm.
wonder if that's like as they're looking at the market, they're looking at the other shooters at the time that totally bombed, and we're like, oh, well, we can't do this and we can't challenge the other games because I think last year and the year before that there were a lot of shooters that came out and just people ignored them and stopped and didn't play them. So
Yeah, exactly. No, and I mean like there have been a lot of games in that vein that came out and didn't like get a lot of play, and even the ones that have like dropped off quickly. Stuff like Outriders. So yeah,
Crucible, Hyperscape, yeah.
yep. Um, but yeah, in any case, the cancellation affects close to 200 people, which is a whole lot. And I think um, as of now, it's unknown as to whether there will be layoffs. But yeah, I mean, studio went through layoffs in 2017 and 2018. And a meeting about the studio's future is happening today. May have already happened. So
Oh,
best of luck to these folks because times are tough. Slightly funnier is politician Josh Hawley talking about how men today are watching porn and playing video games because their masculinity has been criticized
what?
very gently. Yeah, no, he went on this whole rant. We can listen to it, even though it's very
Would we
irritating.
be surprised that after years of being told that they are the problem, that their manhood is the problem, more and more men are withdrawing into the enclave of idleness and pornography
enclave.
and video games? I found the comment by one young man to a Wall Street Journal reporter particularly evocative and particularly heartbreaking.
Great.
He said, "I'm sort of waiting for a light to come on so I can figure out what to do next."
Wow.
Can we be surprised?
Wild.
No, stop playing, please. Okay.
Yeah, I know, right?
Oh wow. I mean, no, I think video games are just a easy scapegoat for. I was just
Mhm.
watching like a video of like, do all bodybuilders think the same? And then one person was like, to a question of like, oh, are you ashamed of people who aren't bodybuilders who don't take care of their bodies? And then one person was like, yeah, they're lazy and they're playing video games. So I don't know. I was like, why did you mention video games? That was really random.
Hmm.
But I think it
Yeah.
just comes up in people's minds.
Right. Well, I mean, it's the continual scapegoat around like actual real issues that are much more pervasive and are more difficult to like address and solve, especially, I mean, elephant in the room is that Hawley is a conservative. Meanwhile, like, so there have been studies into things like this. And one such study found, on one hand, that improved video game technology contributed to a decline in work by younger men. Wow, Mikhail just said he's right. Also, I want to point out the fact that earlier Mikhail said Mario characters, Luigi would definitely be into NFTs. And yeah, I can agree with that. Luigi he's totally an NFT guy. And the next like Smash Brothers is going to be a skin of him as like a low poly kind of like
I think I've
poorly
met
drawn,
him.
whatever.
I think I've met him at these NFT parties I've been going to. Right.
But anyway, so yeah, there's the study, right? Improved video game technology contributed to decline in work by younger men. But a thing that it found, the most important thing, is that basically what games have done has increased the demand. So increased demand for gaming by young men effectively increased their reservation wage, meaning they wanted better minimum pay. Like that's what's happened, is that having
Mm.
other things available has made people realize, oh, companies are paying me trash, And if I'm not going to get paid well to do things I don't enjoy, then I'm going to instead choose to do things I do enjoy.
Wow.
So once again, it was capitalism all along, which is, why a conservative politician would never draw attention to the actual issues. And I mean, this is also like, this then goes into things like the Great Resignation, which is happening right now. So a lot of people are, again, realizing collectively, I'm being paid terribly. There's no hope for my future at this company or many others. So, like, why should I do this? There's no point. And so, of course, like the powers that be would want to escape that with things like video games and pornography, buzzwords, scare words. But in the end, it's always the same old issue. People are being mistreated and they've decided they've had enough.
Yeah.
So anyway, on that note, Twitch entered into a partnership with crypto.com.
Oh no. Well, I'm glad
Yeah.
I missed this. I looked at this, I think, for like a split second. It looks like spam, so I just like
Yeah.
flipped down and scrolled away.
Yeah. Crypto.com has been making plays in a lot of, like, unsurprisingly, crypto.com is like targeting all of the various things that men between the ages of 18 and 34 are into. So they actually also have a partnership with the UFC such that fighters have to walk out wearing shirts that say crypto.com on them. Fighters see not even a cent of the money that came from this, I think, over $100 million deal. Similarly, this seems to be a Twitch-based deal. Basically, crypto.com gets their logo on Twitch Rivals events, which are like competitive events that Twitch hosts. They're doing one right now where they have a bunch of streamers out in Vegas. Yeah, in Vegas, competing in various physical challenges. And so, yeah, they just get their branding all over that. Previous companies to do a similar deal include the United States Army. So, yeah, this
Yeah,
is all very fun.
the army has invested millions into Twitch.
Oh, yeah.
It's interesting strategy, but yeah, I mean, it's been covered in depth already why they're doing that. Yeah.
Yeah. Easy to access crowd of young people, many of them men. Anyway, so yeah, this is, depressing, but so it goes. Crypto's everywhere now. It's the world we live in. In other Twitch news that's also depressing for a different reason, djWHEAT, who is a incredibly long time community person at Twitch, and as I've heard from many people, like one of the nicest people there, one of the hardest working, somebody who like would legitimately go out of his way to like have people's back and make it actually feel like a community. He is leaving the company in January. Yeah, he said his time here has been amazing and a major milestone. His 22-year esports and live streaming journey, but it's time to take a much needed break. In this thread, he goes into a little bit of why, up to and including like taking care of his mental health and stuff like that. He said that he's spent years encouraging creators to take breaks, avoid burnout, and manage their mental wellness, but he hasn't done that so much to himself. And people that I've talked to who know him have corroborated that. They're like, yeah, he's somebody who, for better and worse, had trouble separating himself from the job. So it's very much like it was his identity. And I think that after a certain point, he decided that maybe that wasn't the best way to live, which, fair enough. I think that would that we could all learn from that. But yeah, so he is he's the latest in a long chain of prominent like public facing people at Twitch, the company, to leave this year. All of which suggests, a pretty major sea change within the company. And
Yeah.
I would say that and this is informed speculation, but a fair amount of dissatisfaction with the state of the company within the company. So
Yeah. I've heard that over the years, but also djWHEAT, I think I only came to know of him last year when there were again a lot of DMCA strikes on Twitch, and then I think he posted like a thread to help streamers figure out, what music is okay to use and kind of like talk them through what to do next. So I thought that was honestly very useful and like more communication from Twitch at that time than Twitch itself was giving. So
yeah. I think that he is someone who has always, where possible, tried to err in the direction of more communication, not less. But Twitch is also a company that generally speaking, struggles a lot on that front. And I'm sure that that was probably frustrating. But yeah, so speaking of, well, more Twitch things, this is a story that I've been following on and off for the past couple of weeks. There's a Twitch streamer whose name is SquidGaming.
Oh,
Um, and then like who, in some cases goes by Squid Game, had that name long before the show ever premiered. And now
wow.
just is like struggling. Because for one, initially she like got banned from some platforms because people thought that she was impersonating the show, when in reality she was just using the name she always has. And now she's also losing out on like sponsorship opportunities and things like that because again,
Wow.
the name.
Wow. And
Oh
then
yeah, and of course the classic, she's been subjected to online abuse by fans of the show.
yeah. And the story behind why she's named Squid Game.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very cute reason. That's very sad. I did not know about her. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, no. So now she's at a point where, as it says here, it looks like I might have to change my handle after all. I've lost 2 amazing presenting opportunities because people don't want to hire me with my Squid Game handle. This is really getting me down.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is just wild. I mean, it's one of those things where, like, yeah, this is, on one hand, it feels pretty improbable because, like, what are the odds, right? But on the other hand, as we have more and more, like, everyone's online, everyone has a handle. At some point or another, it feels like you're going to win this awful lottery.
Yeah, you have to copyright it. You have to get a trademark. If you don't, then you have no rights. So
Right. But I mean, that's like messed up, right? When you're just like some starting out streamer, you're not even sure you're going to turn it into a business or whatever. You've got to think about already, like, well, I guess I should go to the US, like, copyright and patent office. Like,
yeah, you wouldn't, and so yeah, then this happens. But
yeah, it's a weird time to be alive, is the short version.
mhm.
Um, and then, yeah, speaking of weird time to be alive, the other end of that is tremendous success. And what comes with that when you are a Twitch star. Recently, Hasan Piker, who's one of my personal favorite streamers, has been talking about how he's considering taking a long break from streaming, specifically quitting streaming for a while. Because people just constantly harass and bother him and misinterpret his words, and that it just like wrecks his mind. Let's see. He said, how did he put it? Wow, this is like some really heavy stuff too. It's like, this is why I hate myself. I hate everyone. I'm constantly stressed out. It's disrupted my sleep schedule. Um, I can't even be honest with my own community for a single moment. It's like everything I can and will I can say can and will be used against me. I feel like I'm going crazy. I feel like I'm losing my mind. And there's no way to show how messed up it is until you experience it, but it's making me go crazy. And like, yeah, I mean, I think that he's expressing it on less on like no uncertain terms, but it's something that I think a lot of more popular streamers deal with. It's like this is what that lifestyle ultimately leads to. Is a lot of harassment, swatting, doxing, and then people clipping everything you say to use it out of context. And like, yeah, it just seems destructive in the long run,
Mhm.
in ways that even like streamers who are moderately successful can't necessarily see coming.
Yeah, yeah, that's I mean, I've already talked to and seen that from a lot of streamers. And
Yeah.
yeah, it just sucks. I mean, it's like you have these auto mod tools and you have these ways of moderating, and then that's not enough because people just continue to harass you off and on and off the platforms.
Hmm. But yeah, and then even beyond that, just like the ways that people react to you and what you're doing generally, like I think it primes you, right? If you're immersing yourself in this day in and day out all the time, like with a chat that may be prone to, misinterpreting what you're saying or like messing with you or saying terrible things to you, like that becomes your default program. Like you're on a hair trigger at that point, right? It becomes your default response to just people in general because it's the headspace you're in for 10 plus hours of the day every day. And so yeah,
Mhm.
as Hasan put it, like I now blow up on people regularly. I see everyone looking for deeper meaning in every random action I engage in, whether it be on Twitter or Instagram. Like the now blow up on people regularly part is really key to me. It's like, yeah,
Mhm.
because he's probably just, when he's dealing with people who are acting and reacting to him this way online, then that puts him in a headspace of anger. and it's hard to leave that headspace when it's the one you're in for most of your day. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think he has to also play up his personality for the stream, right? So it doesn't
mhm.
make anything easier.
Yeah, it's a lot. Anyway, in a slightly lighter bit of streamer news, Twitch added a new category for animals. This, I think, at the beginning of the week, and Amaranth immediately shot to the top of it. And you might be like, "Why is she there?" And the reason is actually a totally valid one. For the past like year or so, she's been doing streams where she goes to like a ranch and hangs out with horses. Yeah.
Nice.
And so she has a massive viewership, and that obviously means that anything she does will go to the top of a chart in like most categories. And it's funny though, because this is like the second time that she's taken over a new section this year.
Mm-hmm.
When Twitch made the pools, beaches, and hot tubs category, of course she was at the top of that too. So
Got it.
um
Yeah.
yeah, I wonder if Twitch will add a category that she can't take over next.
I'm sure there'll be something.
Yeah. It's just super funny to me though. Let's see, what are some other fun things? I think that we can bypass these because they're a little bit like weird. They're not that interesting. This is basically just like, this one's funny to me. It's very strange. Just a quick thing. Streamlabs is partnering with this credit card company that determines your dollar limit based on your clout. Yeah, it's called Carrot. Creators are underserved when it comes to banking and finance.
What?
Carrot determines your credit limits based on your social following. Sounds like an incredibly bad idea.
Yeah. Wow. That needs more vetting to figure out if that's even real or not. I mean, I've been getting messages from friends saying, "Can you add me to this banking app?" I'm like, "No, I'm not. I'm not joining this banking app so you can get $10." No, just sounds like a scam. I don't even have to look into it. I don't want to. So
Yeah, that sounds mad sketch. I would assume that Streamlabs, being this like very big streaming utility company, would vet a company before going into a partnership with them, but who knows? Because this does feel, yeah, kind of sketch. Anyway, on to something that I think that you'll be interested in, which is so the basis of the news is that last night Nintendo out of nowhere dropped the new Animal Crossing update several days early, or
oh
a couple days early. Did you know this?
no, I
Oh,
didn't know
yeah,
this.
the new update's out now.
Oh my
It's
god,
been
I
out
have to
since last
go.
night.
All right, I have to leave the stream right now. I have to go
And
play Animal
so
Crossing. But okay. Wow.
the thing you are most interested in, we got some new food.
Okay. This is. Oh man. Okay. I have to get
Look
back
at that.
to.
Look at those beautiful pancakes.
Yeah. No, I have to go and do that right now. Like honestly, not even.
Oh man, a bagel sandwich. I think that's a breakfast sandwich. It looks amazing. They have lovingly crafted these foods.
Oh my god. There's
Made my
gnocchi.
birthday.
Wow.
Let's skip that ad. Yeah.
I think it's very nice that you're giving ad revenue back to your own employer.
Well, I do what I can. I definitely I'm a big fan of the people who would be benefiting from this ad revenue, which is not the people that I worked with, unfortunately.
Mm.
Um, yeah. But anyway, so new food is in the game. There's also tons of new items, like
Yeah.
wearable swords, backpacks, and there's a first person mode.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's gonna be weird.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wild though. They've added a ton of stuff. It's out now. People can play it.
Yeah, the question is it too late or can they get people to come back? And is the music too triggering for people? Like, does it remind them of like March 2020, April 2020 in the pandemic and like
Oh man. That is a
dark,
perspective I had
depressing
not considered.
things? Yeah, yeah. Gene had it first with his tweet. Like, he can't play Animal Crossing because the sound just reminds him of last year. And I actually really agree. But I have played it on and off here and there. Like when they had swimming or like dreaming, I went back to the game.
Mhm.
But I would go back for the food. I mean, all the other things here are great, but I'm not gonna bother with them. I'm just gonna be cooking. I've been cooking in real life. Now I can cook in the game and
Oh man, you can cook while you cook.
oh, that seems
Yeah.
seems
Have your switch
dangerous.
right there. You may
Uh
feel the immense disappointment when everything that you cook in the game takes like 2 seconds. In real life, it's like 45 minutes or an hour. It's like,
yeah. Yeah. Well, you still can't craft. I believe you still can't craft in bulk, right? So you probably can't cook in bulk, so at least it's like some level of realism there.
Yeah, at least there's that, I guess. Oh yeah, here's one that I think you'll find interesting. Jinx from League of Legends is coming to Fortnite.
Oh yeah, they announced that today.
Yeah, I feel like this is a prime opportunity for somebody to become like a Jinx one trick in multiple games. I mean, like I want that to be somebody's reputation. They're just like a one trick with a particular character across every game that character is in. And like
Oh my
not a bad one
god.
trick either. They're like really good with that character. It's just the only character they'll ever play.
I think it'd be funnier if they were a really bad one trick. I mean, there's this phrase in League called vein spotting, when you spot a vein because they're so bad and they're doing the same thing again, where they're
Mhm.
just like, you know, dying 10 times and making your whole team lose. But yeah, I think she doesn't look the same though. She looks too happy and kind in this video.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much like the Fortnite art style, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's also another downside of like the metaversification of games is that you have these like generic art styles that suck so much life out of characters.
Yeah, I've also heard it being described as like the Pixar style because this art style is also in like Knockout City and a couple other like kid-friendly games, and it's just like it's an animation style that comes from, I don't know, Disney maybe. But yeah, like Jinx in League is super like aggressive, and she's based off. I think she's based off Harley Quinn. So not at all this like very innocent, happy-looking avatar, but I guess.
Yeah, I was gonna pull up. But yeah, I mean, she has very much like a Harley Quinn vibe to her, right?
Yeah, her voice lines, even like her weapons, like everything is based off Harley Quinn.
Yeah, I mean, like this is definitely a very different looking character
Yeah,
than the
like
one that we just saw.
demonic red eyes. She has blue
Right,
eyes
like
here.
like this is kind of night and day, honestly. Like, look at this. Like, I am
Yeah.
an innocent child here to save the day from 99 other people. And then
Eddie.
this one's more like, I'm gonna kill everyone with my big shark gun. No
Yeah.
day saving, just murder.
Yeah,
Um,
and those are her lines too, right? She's like, "Yeah, let's blow up some stuff. Let's go." Um, but yeah. Anyway, yeah, I think there'll be more because the Netflix show is coming out this Saturday, so there'll be more of this like League. I'm not gonna use that word. Universe, multiverse,
hmm,
MCU, but League.
the
And
League Cinematic Universe.
yes, I will just avoid using the other word that we've been using. But moving on.
Meta
No.
Gear Solid.
Okay, sure,
Yep.
I'll go with that.
Oh,
Wow.
Washington Post Gaming. Some internet rando says that I'll have you know Jinx is actually my main. Wow.
That's
Nice.
tough. I tried to main her. She takes a lot of practice.
Yeah, but she's very good because you can like come out of spawn and just immediately launch your ult down the middle, or
Yeah,
like
but
not even down the middle.
you have to aim.
You
Like
do.
you have to know where they're gonna be and then aim. Like that's the hard part. Okay,
I
anyway.
I I have a friend though who's pulled off so many like just random shot kills with that ult. He's just
Hmm.
launched it down like the bottom lane
Mhm.
and just somehow gotten a kill, and we're all like, yeah, oh my god, let's go.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have not, but I do play this role, so I mean I could transition up okay. So,
Yeah, lots of strange things we're about to encounter. One of them is just Soda Poppin, who's a streamer, accidentally flooding his hotel room as part of this Twitch Rivals event. But I feel like we're running low on time, so I can skip that one. Anyway, important things for the end of the stream, because I always like to end on, kind of a lighter note, make things fun. So first of all, I wanted to show off my Halloween costume.
nice.
Yeah,
Oh
I was,
man.
of course, the most recent and final character to be added to Super Smash Brothers. I'm talking, of course, about Sora from Kingdom Hearts. Yeah, you will see that I aimed to include all of the various trademark iconic imagery that comprises the character of Sora. So, we got his trademark hat, his gloves, his keyblade, obviously, his mustache. Sora is very famous for that. So, yeah, that's who I was for Halloween.
Cool.
Sora from Kingdom Hearts, who, again, just to make sure, that you're aware
all right. You
is
don't
from
have to.
Kingdom Hearts.
You can stop saying that. It's fine. The first time was enough, and also these words. That's also enough. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just trying to give you this like expression from my Halloween costume, which is like a very disgruntled Gay Valentine. I'm just disgruntled in general.
Wow.
But yeah.
It's disgruntled in general. Then, I mean, is it even a costume? Or is it just who you are?
Yeah, that's the good question. Like that's what I hope everyone asks themselves every Halloween.
Right. Where's the line? Who am I? What am I doing? But anyway, and then to end, one final thing. Somebody dug this up and just like retweeted it the other day, and it's just good. So whatever. Sonic the Hedgehog not only met Crash Bandicoot, but also had a dance off with him during E3 2017. It ultimately ended with a draw where the two decided to peacefully coexist. It should be noted Sonic did not bring his A game to this dance battle. Anyway, let's watch these boys throw down.
Okay. We got a dance off.
Yeah, even like a little dancer somehow.
When your moves are that sick, you don't need music.
They shouldn't.
Yeah, see, like Crash starts going for it. Sonic sort of flailed his arms around, and then Crash is moving. Surprising agility for a bulky costume.
I somehow missed this is a dance off. I thought this was like a wrestling match. So I was like, what is he really doing?
Oh man, I wish it was a wrestling match. That'd be amazing. Though definitely dangerous given the floor that they're on. But no, then Sonic's just like over here, whatever. Like clearly not really thinking, like not dancing so much as just sort of moving his arms around. And Crash is like, yeah.
All right, it's time for you to go for that golden ring.
So maybe if you're moving, come back next year.
No, we can only hope. We need a rematch. We need a rematch after like Sonic spent the past several years just training to become a better dancer. Every
He's
day he
lost.
like wakes up in a cold sweat remembering the embarrassment of this moment.
He's lost
James
99
Jack.
times, and he's hoping.
Wow, Crash is really going for it. I feel like one of these people is like a professional entertainer and like lives for this, and the other one is just somebody who had to put on a costume for a day. And he's like, man, I hate my job.
Maybe he thinks it'd be. Maybe it's a bit of like he is actually a really good dancer.
I think it's a tie.
This is what amount of effort I'll give you
I think
today.
we should be friends, Sonic.
I'll give you 1/10
I
of
think
my
we
power.
should be friends. There's too much hatred in the world. We can both sit here.
Yeah,
and
James
there,
Jackson says
and
such
exist
cringe.
together.
And
What do you
I
say?
raise you that cringe is the best kind of content. The other content is just they hug. See, so it's also heartwarming. You call this cringe, how dare you? But then in addition, yeah, so Washington Post Gaming says, please like, sub, and hit the bell notification button for more content like this. Yep,
Exactly.
that's the reason that you're subscribing. That's what you're signing up for.
It's just
I
all
will,
of this content for 2 hours every week. Why would you
right.
not sub?
Exactly. I will endeavor to my dying breath to bring you more really dumb stuff that I find on the internet like this, because that's where my true passion lies. Journalism is just a job for me. Finding dumb things on the internet and talking about them is what it's really about. Anyway, with that said, I think it's time to wrap up and probably receive some sort of threatening call from my superiors. But no, for real. Thanks for tuning in, everybody who watched. And we will be back doing this again at 4 p.m. ET next Thursday. I have been and will probably remain Nathan Grayson. And
Who are you?
darn, I already stopped being Nathan Grayson. Well, I'm going to have to deal with that. In the meantime, who are you?
Oh, well, that one's easy. But also, like, don't forget tomorrow is the gaming stream as
Oh,
well.
yeah.
I believe our colleagues are going to be playing Call of Duty Vanguard. Maybe we'll see. But yeah, I'm Shannon. Now, I don't know who you are, but I know who I am, I think.
Wow. Well, I appreciate that you're so confident in your identity. But anyway, this has been Washington Post Story Mode, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.